can't do a thing. Existential offspring, escaping the rain, hating the pain. Just do what you like to keep you alive, but I see nothing, just lies. Ooh, you can't beat me, lying my mind, puffed up thick in avoidances and sighs. Well, my dog wanted something for a little while. Didn't realize something was nothing more than a smile.
In Buddhism, everything is like a dream. Life is like a dream. Thunder, moisture, light.
Sit there, resting still. Watch thoughts fade, dig deeper in the wave. Simplify my life, lose perception of time, attach myself to one, faded in every direction.
Seeking the rest and knowledge advertised by South Korea's Templestay program, I passed by hundreds of strangers in Seoul. The nightlife as a foreign visitor was already excitingly enticing. I had danced and talked many nights away underground. In the search for who and how to be, I've wanted an epiphany to show me how to live. Too much of my time seems to have been spent reading and thinking without clear lasting daily benefits for myself or others. What should I do with each day is a question I could learn and think about for the rest of my life. But I've been wondering every day why I'm doing anything at all. I've come here to learn and meditate, trusting that if I can know and be at peace with myself, I can be beneficial to all. A Templestay program weekend experience in South Korea is advertised by the Cultural Corps of Korean Buddhism, an organization separate but linked to the Jogye order, as an invitation to Korean Buddhism and an opportunity to know thyself by resting the body and mind. The message is not much different when one arrives.
So this is the main Buddha hall, so if you want to go inside, use the side doors. And the name is Great, Silent, Lightful Space. In the Buddhism, the light means wisdom. The Buddha explained about the light like this. We are living here, and this is like walking in the forest, but we are closing the eyes. Because of that, we run into the tree, slip, fall. We are suffered. We hope to escape. hope, maybe kind of we desire to get something special, something I don't have, special wisdom, special enlightenment. But the Buddha said, we don't need, because just open the eyes, then you can escape from that delusion, from that suffering. So, because of that, the Buddha said, don't worry, be happy. The silence is for that, for recognizing myself.
Foreigners and Koreans alike are attracted to learning and practicing the monastic and cultural traditions of Korean Buddhism. The Templestay program can be viewed as a popular product of the contemporary religious market in South Korea that arose out of the rapid economization, modernization, industrialization, and Americanization of South Korean society. The Ministry of Culture and Tourism wanted Korean temples to house the large number of visitors expected for the 2002 World Cup hosted in South Korea and Japan. While the idea of housing drunken football fans in their temples sparked controversy, the Jogye order eventually agreed, given that the participants would also take part in an experience of traditional Korean culture and Buddhist practices. The executive director of the Jogye order at the time conveys how a Templestay experience involves learning about oneself through practicing the cultural and spiritual traditions of Korean Buddhism. Korean Buddhism is opening the doors of temples, which have preserved 17,000 years of history and tradition, to guests from all over the world. We are inviting you to this traditional space, which strives for perfect harmony between nature and Buddha's teaching of dependent origination. The concept that my neighbor, nature, and myself are not separate, but all are one. Here, you can reflect on your inner self, and you can thoroughly experience a slice of Korean culture. The Templestay program is run by people both inside and outside of the Jogye order. Each Templestay has a different director that is not a monk or nun, who runs the overall experience. Thus, while most Templestays include similar, or even the same activities, each is shaped slightly different by the director's knowledge and choices in expressing East Asian Buddhism.
If the lay people want to make this prayer big, then they have to do 108 prostrations. So, with one time of the prostration, they can put one bead, and the second prostration, they can put the second bead, so like that. So after finishing the first round necklace, then they can use this necklace for counting their prostrations, the 108 prostrations. So this is the tool for their practicing, not as a symbol of the Buddhism or power of the Buddhism, Buddha or something. So simply the 108 number means everything in the universe. Because we can meet this word with our senses, kind of this. This is bead, the prayer bead, the necklace. So like that, with our senses, the eye, nose, tongue, skin, ear, and mind, with these 6 senses, we can meet this word, everything. We can see, we can listen, we can smell, we can taste, we can think, we can touch, right? Do we have extra? No? So with these 6 senses, after meeting that, then we judge about this universe. Like this. It's delicious. This is beautiful sound. This is beautiful painting.
The general focus of resting the mind and body in each moment is an introductory, practice-oriented approach that draws on simple explanations and metaphors to invite all to see into the numinous awareness of our minds. The source of all our experience and our original spiritual knowing is described as awareness because our senses and discriminations we see in the outward world are first experienced by a mind that is quiet and still, and numinous because our awareness always shines a pure, active, harmonious light that adapts to our changing world of reality. If we happen to receive the instructions of a spiritual mentor and suddenly awaken to this void and quiescent awareness, that quiescent awareness becomes free of thoughts and formless. Who then would assume that there are any signs of a self or a person? Upon awakening to the fact that all signs are void, the mind naturally becomes free of thoughts. If we are aware of a thought at the moment it arises, by being aware of it, it will vanish. The sublime approach to practice lies only in this.
If you want to ask something, you can just
Oh,
tell
okay.
me.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
I think that this morning,
The
tea time,
tea time.
we
Yeah.
have some conversation about Buddhism and
Yeah.
monastery and things like that. But I'm not sure if you.
If I have more questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I always have more questions.
I can learn how to communicate with normal people.
Right.
Before I came here, I was in the mountain for 8 years in Jeollanam province. So it's the Templestay program is it's very new challenge for me as
Yeah.
well.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Because he stayed in some kind of hermitage in the mountains.
I lived there for 4 years, and I had to just learn and practice how to do chanting and how to behave in the temple as a Buddhist monk, things like that. So actually, I didn't study hard about Buddhism. Not that enough.
Now he came to Seoul City and he went to the Dongguk University and met some people and normal people and 그 young generation. He
right.
talks a lot. Maybe some kind of challenge. He now he majored in some kind of teaching Buddhism.
Korean Buddhism arose out of the developments and interactions between Buddhist monks and nuns and lay people in China, Japan, and Korea. While China and Japan are commonly connected to Mahayana Buddhist thought culminating in Zen Buddhist practice and the Bodhisattva ideal of compassion for all beings, Korean monks played an influential role in harmonizing and synthesizing the various doctrines, schools, and practices. The largest and most widely influential Buddhist order in Korea, known as the Jogye order, arose out of the Japanese colonial takeover of Korea, where Korean Buddhist communities were put under Japanese state control, and reform efforts to make Korean Buddhism accessible to the mass public were stifled. Korean Buddhism was in danger of losing its own status and vitality when the Jogye order, a unified, multi-layered, and state-sponsored order, was established to keep the Korean Buddhist tradition alive and ready to meet the globalized world. The plurality of approaches and expressions given on how to save oneself and others has often caused strong disagreements and controversies over how best to live in truth. Wanyo, a 7th century monk, and Chenal, a 13th century monk, have been highlighted in recently established academic research into Korean Buddhist history for representing particularly inspiring Korean expressions of the way. Korean Buddhism often favors a practice-oriented approach to salvation, but is generally characterized as an interpenetration of various Mahayana Buddhist doctrines and practices, showing their harmony and unity. Contrary to the popular idea that Zen Buddhism makes no use of doctrines and concepts, the historical and modern Korean Buddhist community see doctrinal explanations are useful in guiding a student's practice of tracing back one's experience of all phenomena to its source of empty, numinous awareness. The most essential doctrinal explanation for enlightenment is none other than the call to believe that I am already a Buddha, living in perfect harmony and unity with all existence and capable of a vast array of compassionate actions. Yet, my created habits of thinking, doing, and being have often, and continue, to attach me to seeking final rest in what I have created in my mind to be good. When asked how a beginning student should enter into spirituality, Wanyo replied, saying, "If there are constant flows and vicious circles of false imaginings from beginningless time, it is because of the tendency of living beings to separate the forms and names and to become attached to them. This is the reason why, if one wants to go back to the source of this stream, one should separate himself from the false characteristics of reality which exist only temporarily. If there still remains any subjective intention to look for any objective things, one cannot recognize innate enlightenment." As some Koreans do, I went to see a nun and spend some time at Gunsunsa Temple every so often. It was only an hour-long subway and bus ride, plus a 20-minute hike into the mountains from my dormitory at Ewha Women's University. At my first temple stay, I became friends with a Korean nun, Sunwoo. 2 other Americans, a couple and I, drank tea with Sunwoo on Sunday morning. We talked about what Buddhists believe, and I asked her that if all things in life could be performed with meditation, how can I know what acts I should do? She replied saying to look back on my mind and see what was there. When I told her I was in Seoul for a semester, she wanted to have tea with me again. She could practice English, and I could ask her questions she could tell I was still wanting to ask. In Chenol's culminating book, Excerpts, which is read in the first years of education for most monks in the Jogye order, he practically outlined the uses and dangers of 4 major approaches in Zen schools to the cultivation of meditation and wisdom through his own practical experience and analysis of major monks and texts. He believed it was possible to awaken by following any of the 4 paths, and while showing preference for the doctrine of the Hizi school, Chenol wrote how the Northern, Oxhead, and Hangzhou schools' expressions in doctrine and practice provided specific benefits based on practitioners' particular struggles. The Northern school sees the cultivation towards enlightenment as polishing the dust of afflictions like attachment and ignorance off a reflecting mirror with doctrinal explanations. Polishing refers to the process being a gradual and progressive control and removal of afflictions to free the reflectiveness of our mind, to adapt beneficially towards whatever comes into our experience. While helpful after an initial awakening in ensuring that our deepest attachments are given up, Chenol sees the whole approach as being compromised because it neglects that all conditioned habits and ways of thinking arise out of empty, still, quiet, numinous awareness. In other words, harvesting the good and dispelling the bad is dangerous when we are attached to our created signs and meanings of them. At the temple, there were many periods of silence. The urge to check my phone slowly passed as I got used to being where I was with who I was with. At a Templestay experience, you probably won't make a lifelong friend, and it is not geared towards the sharing of painful and troubling thoughts and experiences. One noticeably different social convention between even spending a day at the temple and a day in Seoul or back home was that you greeted people and entered a room by bowing slightly with your hands together. A temple stay, for the most part, is rid of forced conversation, although great conversations can certainly take place. Tea time with the monk was usually a highlight of conversation between the monk and temple stay participants.
고향이 3분 어디십니까? Where are you from?
충청도.
충청도.
저는 점촌입니다.
네?
점촌. 문경 세대라면 점촌.
아, 경상도 분이시구나. We have different accents. Ah.
An important aspect of a temple stay is following the temple rules. The first part of a temple stay at Gunsunsa involves learning how to live at the temple. It takes about 15 minutes to explain rules and etiquette. The temple stay director told us that the main rule to keep in mind was not to infringe upon anyone else's freedom. What actions help others keep their minds still, aware, and pure? Korean monastics look to various sources for regulations, including a book written by Chenol, and in 2011, the Jogye order published a new book titled pure rules for Zen centers of the Jogye order of Korean Buddhism, in response to the moral issues raised through the modernization of Korea.
When I was young, I thought Buddhist monk was the best condition to concentrate on and how to learn to know about Buddha's teaching
Right.
and originally.
But the rule is more much benefit for other people and to know more, learn more Buddhism
Right.
and make us a good habit in our body, in our thinking, way of thinking. So it help. But the ultimate purpose is we have to beyond the rule. We have to be liberation of the rule. We don't have to catch the rule. Rule also is a kind of prison.
Mm-hmm.
So we have many arguments about understanding about our rules, because
Right.
When Buddhist images and sutras were sent with a monk from China to the ruler of the Goguryeo kingdom in northern Korea in 372 CE, Buddhism quickly intertwined with and infiltrated the religious beliefs, social culture, and political life, before having the same effect in the southwestern kingdom of Baekje shortly after, and then finally on the southeastern kingdom of Shilla 150 years later. The monk Wanyo wrote influential commentaries on various Mahayana Buddhist scriptures in the mid-600s. The Shilla dynasty then formed an alliance with Tang China, absorbed the other two kingdoms, and unified the Korean peninsula. The high point of Buddhism in early Korea, where the religion inspired the art, architecture, scholarship, court and nobles, popular faith and rituals, patriotism, foreign trade, and diplomacy, was also the high point of the Shilla dynasty. Ideas of the harmonization and interpenetration of all doctrines floated around the plurality of Buddhist monastic schools, but disagreements limited the full possibility for a harmonious unity between doctrines and practices. However, Korean temples throughout history have served as a place where differing expressions in doctrine and practice sit side by side. Most temples have a shrine for the mountain god and other deities, stemming from the original folk beliefs in Korea. Conflicting internal political tensions rose as Zen Buddhist schools gained vitality, exacerbating the divide between different expressions of the way. The unity of the peninsula fell, but Buddhism remained prominent in the religion, culture, and politics of the people, while a local warlord unified the peninsula under the Goryeo dynasty in 935 CE. The ties between Buddhism and political life were now at their apex. A monk's examination system was created by the state based on a Chinese model, and monks who passed, divided between the doctrinal schools and Zen schools, could start to climb a ladder of clerical rankings increasingly associated with wealth and power. The state-sponsored collection, copying, and translation of Buddhist texts, known as the Tripitaka Koreana, was looked to across East Asia as a definitive and widely representative source. The Northern School's gradual approach to Buddhist thought and practice was common amongst ruling classes, the general population, and monastics through ceremonies and rituals, parades, and festivals. Jogye order Korean Buddhists chant in a mixture of Chinese and Korean during 2 daily ceremonies to recognize the guidance they receive from all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, including deceased masters from the temple. The importance of ceremonies and rituals in Korean Buddhism has evolved and fluctuated. The Templestay director and nun Sunwoo told us that the main focus in performing a ceremony, just like any practice at the temple, is to remind us of and return us to rest in our original empty minds. We were given a sheet with the chanting sounds to follow along. An English translation was also available to look at, but most participants kept to following the chanting and accompanying movements. The late 12th century monk Chinal noticed greed and corruption taking over Korean monasteries. Monasteries had become economically prosperous, and becoming a monk was widely seen as a respectable career for men of ambition with material motives. He saw that even monks that weren't outwardly greedy were often more focused on bringing salvation to other people, without realizing salvation in themselves first. Monastics received contributions from the king, other political rulers, and noble families for holding large and small ceremonies and rituals. Monasteries were granted tax exemptions, could lend money, and receive interest, and were granted full control over agriculturally prosperous land. Young Chinal was a member of the Zen order when he passed the monk examination test held at a monastery in the capital city. But it was in this metropolis that Chinal first expressed his idea to form a new temple community open to anyone wanting to advance in the practice of meditation and wisdom. Many object to these types of proposals or to a solitary way of life, including learned monks, on the basis that it will not be of benefit to anyone's salvation, and is a path for being attached to an empty and quiet mind. Chinal thinks that to truly save others, I should first cultivate always being aware of the lack of differences originally experienced in my mind, while seeing the absolute numinous wisdom shaping all my experience, and it is easiest to learn how to do so in a quiet place. Meals at the temple were all vegetarian. Carefully cooked rice, vegetables, roots, and fungi provided what many would consider a healthy and morally conscious meal. During breakfast, we partook in a traditional monastic meal. Traditionally, a monk or nun would have one set of bowls and silverware for food to be immediately washed and cleaned after each meal. The monk guiding us, named Ilga, used the same bowls and silverware that had been placed in front of us. Generally, everyone kept silent and attempted to eat without thinking whether the food was pleasing or displeasing to us, as we had been instructed. Focusing on eating, not slowly or quickly, but on eating alone. Eating was purposeful, meant to sustain the body to function in daily activities. Eating was also taught as a form of meditation, by quieting the mind's response to food and to all external stimuli and mental functioning. Does the mind create all of our sense experience when we eat? Ilga explained we must eat everything we take, or the greedily attached hungry ghosts will come from a lower realm of existence to our world and eat our leftovers, causing us to be reborn as a hungry ghost. With a radish and some hot water that had been individually poured into our bowls, we cleaned and polished any remnants. Tales of karmic merit and lower realms of rebirth are common in Buddhism and the indigenous folk beliefs in Korea, but can often lead to the belief that our quiet and empty mind has been permanently damaged. The Oxhead School focuses on seeing the emptiness and sameness of all reality and all doctrines. Life is like a dream, arising and falling in the mind. When we are asleep, our sense of self and reality attaches to dreams as if they are really happening to us. But when we wake up, we realize that during the dream, we were quiet and still, and nothing really happened.
If life is meaningless, empty, nothingness, then why is it worthwhile to keep living, to wake up and live your life?
The meaningless means everything is have a meaning. The meaning of meaningless is no meaningless, because everything is living. So dreaming, life is just dreaming, but just dream knowing that is dream. It's alive. It's alive, it's life. So we have to dream. But it's an important point, knowing the life is the dreaming. That make sense to you?
In the Oxhead approach, the need to do any work to create harmony in ourselves or with the world is viewed as a deluded hallucination created in our mind. Everything already exists in perfect unity, harmony, and peace with the Absolute when we return to our empty mind. While the ox-head approach is useful in guiding practitioners to an experience of the empty void, Chenal warned against clinging to voidness and idly passing time in mountain monasteries without realizing the dynamic aspect of empty awareness, our numinously wise ability to adapt favorably in all conditions. Life is like a dream, but awakening doesn't mean we stop dreaming.
After I became a Buddhist monk, I realized I need to have a concern about the problem in reality. When I was young, I was not. I used to think about it like you tell me. The life is empty, meaningless. I was think when I was young. But now, I changed my thinking. Has changed.
All kind of job and all kind of role is needed in the life. So there is any special meaning, but there is some meaning. And I think monk is a kind of a symbolic being. I think there's nothing to happen in the real world. I think my life is kind of a symbol in the world, in the life.
The Hongzhu school sees all actions and activities as positive because they all arise out of awareness that is void and pure, and thus all existence can be said to be none other than Buddha nature itself. Wanyo focused on telling students that all expressions and all life can be immediately traced back to a mind that is unified with absolute peace and harmony. Crazy shouts, verbal paradoxes like a huadu, letting go of obedience to a strict moral code, and being fully open to the absolute pure, quiet void characterizes this approach. The danger here is seeing that personal cultivation and benefiting others is nothing more than keeping the mind in a receptive state to receive natural and spontaneous direction from the numinously wise absolute void. Like the Oxhead school, it neglects the role of our wise and pure numinous awareness in shaping our discriminative reality. The Hongzhu school too easily leads to seeing no concrete difference between morality and immorality, but is helpful in overcoming attachment to emptiness and doing nothing. The He school emphasizes the phrase numinous awareness to show that at the place where deluded thoughts and actions cease, and our senses are quiet and void, there exists a mind that is fundamentally self-aware and pure. Life is like a dream, and there is nothing to be proven more real than anything else. Numinous awareness is not caused by any senses or things in the world, and at the point of a quiet and still mind, there is a wise purity that passes through to all of our abilities and adaptations. Quote by Robert Booswell. With the cessation of production and cessation, a quiescent radiance will manifest itself, and our responsiveness will be unlimited. This is Buddhahood. The practice most highly praised by Chenal in maintaining a state of no-thought while cultivating beneficial and harmonious actions was the huadu method of raising doubt around a phrase to elicit both an awakening and continuing to live awakened. Chenal was the first monk to establish its role in the beliefs and practices of Korean Buddhism, but it originated from Zen master De Hui, a monk from 12th century China within the Hongzhu school's approach. The practice of keeping a huadu is meant to generate wonder, questioning, and doubt in our intellect until we expose the root of suffering, attachment to a personal point of view of the world that has been proliferated through our sense experience and conceptualization. Many people throughout Korean Buddhist history, including the abbot successor of Chenal's Society for Meditation and Wisdom, and those alive now in the Jogye order, have placed the method of keeping a huadu so far above any other method of cultivation that the flourishing of a harmonious interpenetration of differing Buddhist doctrines and practices is often stifled. The huadu method we learned at the Templestay was clearly different than the traditional practice, because the traditional practice of raising a huadu is done during all daily activities.
말합니다. 질문도를 묻고.
Simply the Hadu is a question, but this is a kind of great question. That means this is the way to the wisdom, to the truth of this universe, kind of ultimate truth.
그래서 그 화두는 한 가지가 아니라 화두를 드는 사람에 따라서 1700개 정도가 지금까지 남아있어요.
And so, but we are different. So like that, here are so many different Hadu, so many different great questions. So almost 1,700 questions here.
The highest ideal for a person in Mahayana Buddhism is being a bodhisattva, an enlightened being who works within the world until all people are free from suffering. My own experience, and looking back on tradition, convey the difficulty wrapped into helping others, because even bodhisattvas don't necessarily know exactly what is taking place in other people, or how they might react to certain actions or words. Thinking that I must help you can lead to perpetuating suffering in everyone, insofar as I think that being free from suffering means satisfying my own idea of what paradise would be. To be free from suffering, amidst the suffering self and world, monks practice watching their minds be still, pure, and aware, while adapting to their phenomenal experience where things arise and cease to exist.
If a big wave coming to you, just enjoy. If you stand at the edge of the wave, it is very dangerous. But even if the same wave, if you stand at the deep of the ocean, you can enjoy the wave.
Chenal's 3 separate enlightenment experiences happened after reading passages in Zen texts, and like Wanyo, he never held a Dharma master. Chenal's thought had the goal of helping any person interested in cultivating the way. While he did not travel outside of Korea, he spent his time meditating and extensively studying sutras and texts of all the major East Asian religions. The practice of meditation and wisdom has both a relative characteristic-oriented approach and an absolute nature-oriented approach. In our experience of the world, we can transcend selfish desires through controlling distraction in meditation, and transcend a limited point of view by contemplating the emptiness of all teachings. Every experience we have is also infused with our original lack of distraction or delusion in the absolute quiet void. His view of the path as one of an initial sudden understanding awakening to our numinous awareness, followed by gradual cultivation of no thought, like the practice of keeping a hwadu, while also cultivating bodhisattva activities towards a final realization awakening, harmonized Korean Buddhist thought and practice in the concrete temple setting in an unprecedented way. While Chenal views an initial sudden understanding awakening as a full awakening to both knowing reality beyond concepts and the ability to be beneficial to all beings, he sees within himself and other masters that people are often tied down within created habits of reacting, thinking, feeling, and doing. Further cultivation is often necessary in order to close the gap between knowing one to be a Buddha and living as a bodhisattva. Even for monks keeping the precepts, which conveys that they have habits of not harming others or themselves, attachment is difficult to get beyond. Chenal understood that before we actively try to help the world and fight against attachment, a sudden awakening to who we are is necessary to see that when we are cultivating good intentions and actions, we are cultivating nothing but a dream from the standpoint of our numinous awareness. Chenal's third and final awakening happened while reading a copy of the words of Chan Master Dahui, the possessor of universal enlightenment. Zen does not exist in a quiet place, nor does it exist in a noisy place. It does not exist where one responds to daily affairs, nor where thought and discrimination occur. Nevertheless, above all, you should study Zen without leaving such places. Quiet places, noisy places, the places where one performs daily tasks, and the places where thought and discrimination occur. Once your eyes are opened, suddenly, you will realize that this is just like things happening inside your own house. Upon this, I acquired an understanding. Naturally, The obstacle no longer stuck to my heart, and the enemy was gone, and I felt comfortable immediately. A Tale of Tea with the First Zen Patriarch. While meditating, Bodhidharma fell asleep. Disgusted with himself, he cut off his eyelids, not to let it happen again. The eyelids fell to the ground, and the first 2 tea plants sprouted instantaneously from where they landed. He took a couple of leaves to chew, discovered their awakening ability, made some tea, and continued with his meditation. I spent an afternoon or morning drinking tea or coffee with Sunmu every few weeks at Gumsunsa for 5 months. Before I came, I would text Sunmu on KakaoTalk, a Korean messaging app, and as long as she didn't have an obligation, I left my dorm room right away. Over our conversations, I learned why she had become a monk. A university grad, Sunmu and her friends were involved in intellectual, political, and social justice efforts in Korea. They all wanted to live their lives the best they could. They became interested in Buddhism and started attending various lectures and temples. Only Sunmu, out of her friends, has become a nun. But she still visits these same friends regularly to chat about life over some tea or coffee.
있을까요?
Among his friend monk in Korean, Toban. So one of the monk is in England now, and he is in the university, the Bristol University. I don't know exactly, in Wales, maybe. So he is studying there in the university, and he 클럽인가? 클럽 같은.
동아리긴 한데 클럽 내.
So he is in a club, and that club is for the meditation, and he thought there would be just a few people who are interested in that meditation, but beyond his expectation, there were so many students together, wants to practice together, so he wanted to come back and do more practicing in the Korean Buddhist meditation center, so for practicing more together, more fluently.
We have friends in Bristol. Bristol.
The earliest sources of Wanyo's life focus on giving concrete or elaborate explanations of his enlightenment and compassion through all actions. His enlightenment was said to have freed him from attaching to thoughts of dualistic concepts, like right and wrong, and from proprietary standards of morality, enabling him to shine pure in any situation. Traveling all over Korea, he is said to have frequented brothels and bars, playing a stringed instrument singing lyrics that guided others. He could be found lecturing on important Buddhist texts, talking amongst the common people in Korea, or sitting in meditation amongst the mountains and trees. His story has had an influence on monastics keeping the precepts that guide their behavior. Bodhisattva activities that truly help others can be seen as more important than just obeying the strict moral code. The penal system set up by the Jogye order shows this bias, giving more and worse prosecutions to the monk, or none, if another person was harmed in the breaking of the precepts.
맛있다. Good.
그렇지.
Everything have some kind of special purpose. So I don't have to pursue my purpose, because my life, my moment, my present is already perfect purpose. So I don't have to pursue no more meaning. In my young age, I was trying to pursue something meaningless and pursue the purpose of the life. I find that everything is purpose. This moment is my purpose. Life give me. So I just enjoy. I just to feel it. I just listen to the moment. That's the point. Our mind is like that. Every moment, our mind is fresh and new. So we can use fresh mind.
I mentioned about that at the tea time. Before I'm a person who practice a sun meditation, we are a Buddhist religious person in society. So if we are we don't have any idea about social problem, we are useless.